All right, thank you, everybody. This is the third session of Humanizing Your Online Course. It's a workshop series focused on immediately applicable strategies for humanizing or bringing that relationship to your online course. Today's session is with Dr. Florence Martin. She's a professor in the Learning, Design, and Technology department here at UNCC. And she's going to talk to you, Dr. Martin. Thank you so very much.
Okay, so again, as Fred mentioned, I am housed in the College of Education. In the Department of Educational Leadership, we have a program called Learning, Design, and Technology, which focuses on how people learn, design instruction, and also integrate technology into their teaching and learning. So today's presentation, I titled it as Facilitation Strategies to Engage Learners. I think initially I said, maybe I should talk about facilitation strategies and engagement strategies. I've done some work on both, but I think I'm going to focus more on facilitation strategies to engage learners. And that's how I think the description was written. If you want to know more about my work, there's my website. So I teach 100% online. I've taught 100% online for a while now. It's mostly asynchronous online. But before I came to UNC Charlotte at my prior institution, I taught synchronously online. So definitely, switched the online modality, but both works as long as we are able to use effective strategies. So in addition to teaching online, I also research in this space. So online learning is my primary area of research. I've done a few studies on, engagement strategies, facilitation strategies. Recently, I also looked at design elements, all within the context of how can we engage our learners and how can we design and deliver effective online instruction. So some of these practices and strategies I'm going to share with you today comes both from my teaching practice as well as from my research. So I will share from both. Before we get started, before I go to the next slide, if you can take a minute and just tell me in the chat window, maybe which program you are from, and then also maybe what modality you teach in. Like right now, it could be blended. You might be teaching blended, or if you're teaching online, if you can tell me whether it's synchronous or asynchronous or both. Which I refer to it as bicronous. So you could just tell me a little bit more about like what you teach and what modality you use to teach. Communication studies, and I see both synchronously and asynchronously. Okay. You call language and culture studies, special ed and child development, public health sciences. So I see several synchronous, several asynchronous. So you all teach in different modalities. So I'm hoping practices I share can be used across, both synchronous and asynchronous settings. Lydia says corporate training online only. Okay, great. Okay, so I'm going to now go back and share my screen. So yeah, the reason I decided to share my screen is because I'm good, not just the PowerPoint, is because I'm going to pull up a couple of resources while you're talking. Okay. So facilitation strategies. So that is what we're going to focus on today. And if you look at this visual down here, as an online instructor, we all play different roles, right? So that's something I've looked into from research. But two of the major roles we play is the designer and the facilitator. So the designer is all that goes on when we build our course, create our course. And matter of fact, quality matters. For those of you who are familiar with quality matters, this is where they fall under, because it's all about the design of the course. But then once the design is done, technically, there's this whole another aspect called facilitation, right? Facilitation or teaching. And sometimes those who are new to online might think, oh, I put in all this effort to design, so the facilitation should be seamless and it'll just happen naturally. But then again, in facilitation, there's a lot of strategies that you could use to deliver your instruction. So that is the angle that we are going to take today and talk about. So online facilitation is the implementation of the online course with the students. So assuming that you all have designed it, usually in a normal days, non-pandemic days, you would hopefully you would have some lead time to design your course. And in last spring, we didn't have that, right? For those of you who made that quick switch, if any of you made that quick switch, you got like what, a week. So usually you had some lead time to design, and you also have some time to think through how you want to facilitate it. So facilitation is the implementation of the online course with the students. So after you design it, the instructor acts as a facilitator and uses various strategies to actively engage the students to facilitate learning. So that is what we are going to talk about. And the other thing, I want to give you a couple of, just like from framework and high level before I really give you the strategies. So when you're facilitating your course, and this is a really old framework, 1990 from 1995, but it still works. You could be doing like tasks related to pedagogical, right? You're supporting students in their learning. There could be managerial tasks where you're acting as a manager and keeping up with the various aspects of the course. Could be a technical aspect that you're responding to, or it could be social, right? The social element is equally important in the online course because that's something they miss. Unlike in a face-to-face class where it comes naturally, they get to chat with each other. In the online element, you have to make that possible. So you could be, supporting on any of these areas: pedagogical, managerial, technical, or social. So what I did was I came up with these 12 strategies. And these are things that I do in my class. Okay, 12 strategies, out of which we are not going to discuss all 12 in depth today. We're going to talk about 6 in depth today. But I'll quickly at least walk you through the 12. And I try to put them into the different categories, but some of them might even overlap, even though I try to put them in what I thought was the best. And this actually was part of a research study that I did with Dr. Chuang Wang, who's also from Ed Leadership, and with Dr. Sadaf, who's going to be your next speaker, I think, for the Humanizing online series. So we were both involved in this. So for a social element, right, how do you engage your students and facilitate your course to build that social element? So doing a video-based instruction was one of the strategy, and this is something I do. I've seen a number of online courses. Instructors do introduce like using a text-based, with a picture, but I take the time to do like a little video, and I'll show you what I use and how I do it. So that's something I'm going to talk through today. And then another one is being present in the discussion forums. I teach graduate level courses, so I do rely on the graduate students to help me in facilitating it. But then also being there is very important. Being there and addressing them by their name. And, so these are strategies that they know that, okay, the instructor is present, right? My instructor is a real person. So sometimes that's the challenge. So, and again, it's hard to respond to every student, right? That's why you have a facilitator to help you. But then I pick and choose at least, 2 or 3 responses in each forum. I kind of vary who I responded to. I take the time to go and respond. So that's another facilitation strategy I use. Able to contact the instructor in multiple ways. So I do a course orientation, and I'm going to show you an example of what I do. And when I do that, one of the things I include in the course orientation is I give them the order in which they can contact me. I tell them so. The question that came up. Okay. Fred just said Dr. Sadaf's session is on April 19th. Yeah. So I give them a variety of ways in which they can contact me. So the first thing I do is I have something called as Contact the Instructor Forum. And so this is something we will get to in a bit in detail too. Contact the Instructor Forum. It's a forum that I create and included within the course. So if it is a question that is generic in nature about assignment due date or some broken link or something not working, I tell them post it there. But if it is something personal in nature, you don't want the whole class to know about your grade or, an illness, then you want to email me. So I give them steps. So starting with Contact Instructor Forum and then email, And then do you need to call me? And then do we need to set up a time to talk? So those are some ways that you can also build, that social element with the students so that they know that you are reachable. I think that's what is very important. For managerial, I put three over there. The video based course orientation, again, I'm going to show you an example of what I do. I do, once I fully design my course before I open it, so this is the last thing I do before I open it, I record an orientation where I walk through a number of elements, but then I also do like a screen recording of how I've designed my course, like a brief recording where what they can find, and especially if you're new, how to submit assignments and some of those things. So I'll walk you through that. Another one that I use is instructors' timely response to questions. Actually, the timely response to questions and the first one in pedagogy, the timely feedback on assignments. So these two are very, very important. Actually, I did a research study, with these 12 elements. And when we asked students what they thought was the most important, most helpful, not important, we asked them what was most helpful. These two were the ones that came up the highest. Instructors' timely response to questions and instructors' timely feedback to assignments and projects. Because I think, they don't see us, right, on a regular basis, especially for those of you who are doing asynchronous. And I keep thinking, I do asynchronous, not as much synchronous. I think if you do synchronous, it's easier to respond to some of these questions during your synchronous call. But in an asynchronous setting, that immediacy is missing. So in my syllabus, and also this is a good quality matters guideline too, so like you want to include what is your response time. I say 24 to 48 hours. If you have a question and you post it in contact in the instructor forum or you email me, 24 to 48 hours, you should hear from me. And you can also build it in such a way that if there is a weekend, maybe you want to skip the weekend. So that is something that can also be clarified. So timely response to questions, again, shows the instructor is available. So this person is there to answer my questions, right? So that came up really high. And then instructors' weekly announcements to the class. So this is another strategy I use more as a managerial strategy. So every Monday, even if it is a holiday, I create it even ahead of time if needed. And how you can set when the announcement should go out. And I'm going to show like the example how I do this too. So every Monday morning, I call it as ToDos. So week 1 ToDos, week 2 ToDos. Every Monday they get an email from me. So that is another facilitation strategies I use. So along with the ToDos, I talk about other important things that might come up that week where I'm with grading. And so it helps me in a way that I get less questions because of that email. And I'm sure most of you do that. So you might call it something else. So, I call it as my to-do email. It's a weekly announcement I send out. And it doesn't mean that's the only email that goes from me that week. There can be multiple emails, but they definitely will get one on Monday. And if there's another additional one that needs to follow up in the midweek, it'll go out again. So that is one we're going to talk about today. Timely feedback, I briefly mentioned, this came really rated high. Actually, we did the study not only with online students, but with also online instructors. And I'm going to give you the reference to the articles if you want to read it later. And interestingly, even the online instructors thought this was a helpful strategy. These two were very helpful for them. So the classes, again, I teach, these are graduate students, and sometimes the projects build on each other. So unless they get timely feedback, it's hard for them to move on to the next aspect, right? So this is another one with that response time earlier. So what I say is, in my syllabus, I say 7 days. If you submit something, you should get feedback from me in 7 days. So it is sometimes challenging, but in a way, it also helps me with time management because so whatever comes the previous week, I grade it, and I'm not going to take it into the next week because something else might come next. Then I'm going to get overwhelmed, and there's a lot more that's going to get piled up. So that is kind of the strategy I use, and it's worked out so far, which means I've even been grading assignments on Sunday so that I can meet that 7-day deadline on a Monday. So the timely feedback on assignments and projects has been very helpful to students. Instructors feedback using various modalities. So this is one I'm going to elaborate on. I'm going to show you examples on some of these. I'm kind of giving you the quick, rundown on the list, and then I'll walk you through some of these examples. I do a lot of text-based grading, but sometimes, I also do some feedback, like, if you want to do some recording and send them feedback, that's helpful too. We'll look at that as an option. The next one I make students take the time to reflect. I do modules, I do weekly modules, but then also, initially I used to make them reflect at the end of each week and they didn't like it. Even now they don't like it because students don't see the value of reflection a lot of times. What are they getting out of this? So now what I do is I combine 3 to 4 weeks together, and then so like every focus area or high level topic. And then so in the reflection, when they write, I ask them questions like, what benefited you? What challenged you? How do you see yourself applying what you learned in your in your future job, or the transfer? How is that happening? And to that reflection, I take the time to respond to each reflection. So that is where the facilitation comes in, right? The reflection is just an element of design. So in an online environment, even if you have, but it also depends how many students you have in a class. Again, I teach graduate level, so our class sizes are not as large as, what some of you have. So taking the time to respond to students helps me connect with them. And for them to know, okay, so my instructor is reading what I write and she's giving me, so if they're challenged, especially, I'm able to give them additional resources that they need. So that's another way you can support as a facilitator. Moving on to technical, so synchronous, if you're using synchronous sessions, for those of you, using various, the functionality or the features in Zoom right now, I'm assuming most of you moved on to Zoom. For those of you still in WebEx, if you're using features in WebEx, so those are another way, like you can really engage them, right? Using the polling functionality or using the breakout room, like setting that up so that there is that engagement that is happening, and that it's just not being lecture based. So there is a little more interactivity. So that is something you might be able to do. And then the interactive visual syllabi, this was one that was rated the lowest. Students really didn't care how visual, or it was like, I think in the threes, not as rated as high. I take the time to make it like a little bit more appealing, because syllabus can be boring, like for a student to, go through it, all the details, but that was definitely not rated high. But it was included as one of the strategies how you can engage your students. And the last one is instructor created content in the form of short videos or multimedia. So this is a strategy I use again for facilitation. And I've reviewed a number of online courses. A lot of some faculty use publisher material, some faculty use open educational resources. These are all great resources out there. And if it is there, we should definitely use them instead of, reinventing everything, right? But one more thing I do is I take the time is to create like a short video. I call them as e-lesson. So actually, Fred was asking me, is this a typo? What is e-lesson? I actually call it as e-lesson. I coined it. And then my students use it too, because, they're all preparing to be instructional designers. So it's just like, I try not to go more than 15 minutes, because I think you might lose the student if it's a really long recording. But if you really have to share more, you can always chunk it and create multiple videos. So in this e-lesson, what I do is, rather than repeating everything that they've already read and, other videos they watched, it's like kind of synthesizing. I try to do synthesizing or bringing everything together and then my perspective on it. So that is something that I do in addition, which I also consider as a facilitation strategy. And students like like that, that multimedia element. And also when I record my e-lesson, I use Camtasia, and we'll talk about Camtasia too. And then, I use my video as my thumbnail. So students can again see and hear me. And so they know when, I run into them, they recognize me sooner than I recognize them. Because otherwise, there's not too many chances for me to see them other than their profile pictures a lot of times, right? They also do some introductory videos, but the e-lessons is another strategy that helps with facilitation. Okay, so that was a lot, and you can always go back to the list, go back to this list. But this is the reference I wanted to give you before we get into the 6 strategies, which I'm going to spend the next few minutes on. So the first one actually was published in Internet and Higher Education. This is a student perception of helpfulness of facilitation strategies that enhance instructor presence, connectedness, engagement, and learning. So what we did was we took the exact 12 strategies I just walked you through, and then we measured student perception for these elements. And then the second one was the same 12 strategies. We wanted to see what the instructor thought, what was helpful. So, two readings if you want to look at it later. I want to just, and what I've also done is at the end of the slide, even though I'm not going to go through that, I left some findings from these studies in this PowerPoint. So when you access the PowerPoint that Fred has already shared on Dropbox, you also have access to the data. If you don't want to go to the article, but you want to just look at the tables and, some data, you can do that. Okay, so what are we doing today? So 227. So the next few minutes, I'm going to walk you through these 6 strategies, give you examples, what I do, and then hopefully we'll have a few minutes for you to pick and choose 1 or 2 that you want to try, that you might be able to implement in your course. And you might be doing several of these already, okay? So, so the first one is actually, I have individual slides for each of these. So these are the 6 we're going to talk about: the video-based introduction and orientation, instructor-generated e-lessons, moderating discussions with response to different modalities, periodic announcements to the class, using a contact the instructor forum, and the timely feedback on assignments and projects using various modalities. So the first one, actually there's 7, so even though I said 6, the first one could actually be a video-based introduction as well as a video-based course orientation. So the first one is a video-based introduction. So what I do, I'm actually going to stop this full screen mode. I use VoiceThread, but VoiceThread is not the only tool out there. I like this audio visual, they can hear me and they can see me. So, oops, there is that example. And I'm going to stop sharing so I can take you exactly to the VoiceThread. I actually pulled it up. There is the link if you want to look at it earlier. And what I do is not only do I record, but I also have the students do their introduction. And they take the time. I do sometimes screen recordings. I bring in pictures. I vary it up. It's pretty brief usually. So, but let me just show you quickly what I do. Are you all able to see? I have a pretty large screen. Is any of this, you all able to see that? Okay. Hello, everyone. So here is a VoiceThread recording for me. I thought I'll do one so you can get to know me a little bit more. So I've already shared this within the course. So if you go to the... Okay, so I'm not going to make you listen to my entire... So I talk about me. I just pulled up my website, right? I have a screenshot of my website, what courses I teach. I ask them, share something that is someone or something that's special to you. So I take the time to do that. So here's a picture of my family. So this was taken about a year ago. So this is, I tell them where it was taken, and, it's just making the connection with them. So this is where, again, that humanizing element comes, right? I want them to know that I'm a real person, I live with real people, and I have, I go through life with same challenges and all that. So here is another picture. I usually have a travel picture. So wherever I traveled before, I talk about that. So again, VoiceThread is a pretty, easy to use tool. I give them, I don't mandate that they use only VoiceThread, but VoiceThread is one of the tools that I mentioned. And They're quick learners, so they have usually picked it up. If you're looking for other tools, Flipgrid is another one I've seen instructors use. There are also several free, short recordings that they can do. Sometimes like Powtoon videos, or so students sometimes take the time to record videos. So let's take a minute. Any challenges?
Dr. Martin, I think, and I think this is true, VoiceThread is not a tool that UNCC officially sponsors, so it's hard to get tech support. So Celia was asking about whether you had any challenges integrating that with Canvas.
I actually don't integrate it. Like, it's not a plugin that I integrate, but what I've seen is, students will put in an embed link, because they share their videos in a discussion, right? So when I do my instructor introduction, and then I have a forum for them to introduce themselves. So there is some students will just copy paste the link, but some of them will copy the embed link and post it, where the video will automatically show up and you can just click button. I also give them a tutorial, a link to a tutorial, how to use it. So that has also helped. Again, my students, there might be some exceptions too, because mine are usually learning design and technology students, and they're graduate students. But you could, there's so many videos they can do. They can do like a quick video on the phone, right? There are so many apps that they can use these days. So this is not the only one. So having, and they enjoy seeing each other too. And I see comments sometimes I see when I make them do it, oh, I've taken classes with you, but I didn't know you do this. So the way you set up that introduction, might sometimes be a little more engaging with that video-based introduction. So that is one strategy I want to leave you with, if any of you would like to try. Does anybody do any other tools? Is there anything else you use for an instructor introduction? It could be instructor introduction and student introduction. It's just a video-based. Okay, Celia says Flipgrid. Okay. Okay, and you can also grade it with SpeedGrader. Great, yeah. Okay. Kaltura, Carrie says, yeah, Kaltura is another simple option, right? You could just use that to do a video-based introduction. That's a great recommendation, because that's built in Canvas automatically. And I actually have a Kaltura example coming up later. I'll show you that. So moving on, let's talk. I want to be conscious of time. We are at the halfway mark. Course orientation. So this is one I do. You all, if you're teaching online, you might have a getting started module or a start here module with a lot of elements that you put in, right? And I do a getting started module with a ton of things for them to go through. But then I also take the time to do this short course orientation. Like when I say short, 10 to 15 minutes. I do it on Camtasia. College of Ed has Camtasia licenses. I don't know if that is if everybody has it or how that works. But again, Camtasia is not the only tool again, right? You could do this using Screencast-O-Matic. You could do this using Loom. There are even free tools. Fred, were you going to add something?
Yeah, I'm sorry. As to my understanding, we have a site license to Camtasia. So you can go through the Software Center if you're on your UNCC device, and you should be able to install it that way. I've already posted instructions for that in the resource document, and I'll post them again in the chat as well.
Okay, great.
Camtasia is a wonderful tool.
Yes, great tool. Initially there might be a learning curve, but once you learn it, I think it's great. And during the pandemic, I got myself a green screen, and I was very excited about that, because now I can do my videos without anything in the back, so you can just see me. I'm going to show you an example. Okay, so that was okay. So this is an orientation that I recorded in fall, and I'll let it. Okay. There you go. Let's play it for a few minutes. If you see it's 14 minutes, I try to do no more than 15, so sometimes when you're talking through it, it goes quick. So I'll show you some screens. So again, I'm talking a little bit about myself, talking about the course, how I've structured the course. The course goals I talk about, I'll play it in a minute, but I want to show you some of the things I include. Course structure, I talk through it. So some of these, when you do this orientation, it really helps them understand, what they are getting into for the next 15 weeks. So let's play it here. And then there's a variety of activities and assessments, which could include discussions, which could be projects, and then also the so here is the whole page, as you can see, my pattern page. So okay, I'm going to pause there. And then if you go to the next, new item, there's lesson which I mentioned. Sometimes it's a recording that I do, less than 15 minutes. I don't take it longer than that. If I'm not recording, if I have a guest speaker. Yeah, so you get the sense, right? What all I talk about grading, right? Let me actually pause. I don't think you want to listen to me. And then, this is the one I said, the assignment submission. I tell them they have to submit it through Canvas. I'm very particular about that. No emails with your large file. So this is another one, how to contact me. I talk through this. So they help contact the instructor forum, email, there's my Zoom link, there's the phone, and then there's like also the office hours if you want to like schedule and talk to me, all by appointment, right? If you're not doing the office hours. So I walk them through that. And then in the second half, what I do is, this is the part that, so I record this with a set of slides, but after I'm done with the slides, I take the time actually to see. This is the core shell. I'm like walking them through how I've designed the shell. Yeah, I don't know if you can hear the audio. So I show them exactly where, of the various elements are there in the course. So that is what I am doing there. So again, so I have used, sorry, the wrong one. I used Camtasia for that. Okay, and it's great to hear we have a site license. If any of you want to try it, it has that option where you can put your video at the very end default. I just record it. I'm usually not even editing, I record it and then I hit publish, and then it saves, gives you an, I think, MPEG file. And then you can actually put it directly into Canvas. And then get it even transcribed. Sometimes I put it on YouTube. So this one, for example, is on YouTube. And then I do the YouTube link within Canvas. Only thing is, if you do it on YouTube, then you have to transcribe it outside, right? If you put it through Kaltura within Canvas, then, there is the transcription, automatic transcription service you could use, and then you can get it transcribed. So that is something I do, another strategy. So when they've taken the time to watch the 15 minutes, again, they know, okay, I do have an instructor. This is what she does, So it's just not reading the text, right? They are here seeing me, hearing me, seeing me walk them through the course. So that's another strategy I want to leave you with. So are there anything that you do for introductions before we go to the next one? I'd like to see. Okay, I see Snagit has one. Yes, the screen captures, you could do images and screens, definitely. I even use Snippet, just if I want to just capture the screen, if you're a Windows user, the snipping tool is my favorite, because you can, if you just search for the snipping tool, then you can snip any aspect of your screen. Maybe what Lydia is mentioning, maybe it's the same. I'm not sure. The Windows Shift plus S. I've not used that shortcut. Okay, several of you are mentioning Snagit. Okay, machine transcription is automatic. Additional options for human captions. Okay, that's Fred saying. Okay, yes. Kaltura videos. Okay, Melody says she uses Kaltura videos. So that's a great another option, right? So there are so many tools. It's not the only one that you could use, but this is one that, I've been using and it's worked out pretty well. Okay, so let's go to the next one. I'm actually going to go full screen now. Okay. So this is one, just a strategy, an easy strategy that you might be able to use. So when I do responses, a lot of time we do text-based responses, right? So sometimes I also take the time to post visuals and videos. So this was a comment from the last fall course. And, so sometimes if you're synthesizing something, want to give like additional information, if there is something that can tie it together, I think that's a great way to, again, differentiate the monotony of text-based discussion. So that is another easy thing that one can do, right? Including visuals within the text discussion, within the discussion forum. You could do visuals, you could also do videos within the text. So within the discussion. So just varying it up also is very helpful. So that's another strategy I want to share. And actually, there's another, I actually have a few slides on this. So this is, I looked at this from a moderating lens. And what I've done is, the class, the same class, I'm actually teaching it again this semester. And what I did last time is students complained that it was so text heavy discussion. So about half the week, I wanted them to get used to how discussions work, the peer facilitations work. But then the second half of the class, what I did was, instead of them responding with a text post, I gave them choices of tools which they had to use to respond. And I will get to that in a few slides. Okay. So that's another way you can also engage your learners in. Oh, yeah, next slide, actually. Right, next slide. So this is integrating various tools in discussion. So what I did, I used a variety. Actually, there's one on the left. I made them create flyers on Canva. Those of you who have used Canva, it's very easy to use, has templates. So instead of them just creating a text, I told them, so I think this particular one was about innovation, technology innovation in higher ed. And they had to talk about one particular innovation. And that student, if you see, she's talking about artificial intelligence. And so she created a Canva post. And I can tell you, it's pretty easy to use. And students really love that. And those can also be embedded. I've seen students embedding them in the discussions. Some will still post the link, and I take both. But so having that also varies up the facilitation and kind of engages your learners. And the one on the right actually was a screencast-o-matic video. So if you see, again, I tell them you have to respond to that prompt. And this was a prompt, again, it was an innovation-related one. And they had to pick a couple. And so she wrote about mobile learning and adaptive learning. And the student used Screencast-O-Matic, which is free. And it's a great tool for them. And they love, so they are not typing. So she was talking. Sometimes, some of them actually used PowerPoints and then they were like talking through it. Some of them were just talking, right? Instead of typing, they were just like doing discussions, audio discussions. So that's something. And I gave them, you see, I think choices. I gave them Loom, Screencast-O-Matic. And this third one actually was the Kaltura option, I think. It was within that, whatever comes with Canvas, so you don't even have to go external. You can just use what is internal within Canvas, and you can use that to create engaging discussions. So that is another way. So as an instructor, you can do the same when you facilitate, but then you can also have students do this when they are participating in discussions. So another way to participate in engaging discussions. And let us see if there are any tools any of our faculty today have used. Anything else that you all have tried when you do discussions? Okay, and again, this is very async focused, right? Very asynchronous. For those of you do more heavy synchronous, you never know. There might be a way for you to also, like if you do any async introductions or something, right? There might be a way to build in some of these. And students have definitely valued these engaging, peer conversations. So when I do discussions, if the class is like, large, I also try to do groups, discussion groups for the same topic. I divide them into groups. So the class size, a discussion group is a little bit more like, manageable size. So that's another feature that I've used. Okay, let's move on to 245. Periodic announcements. I talked about this early on. This is a very simple strategy. Very, very simple. Students know exactly they're going to hear from me, anticipated. So you can see, I took a screenshot of like all the posts that have gone out so far, and then I put one. I couldn't put the full one, but then you see just the screenshot there, partial screenshot. So I call them as the to-do emails. So that's another humanizing strategy for them to know that, okay, I'm going to hear from my instructor. And even in this announcement, it does not have to only be text-based. You could also do a video when you send out these announcements. So there is an option for you to embed a video. So quickly, if you want to tell them something, in addition to the text, you could also do that. So sending that periodic announcements and using different modalities, that's also helpful. So Fred says, played with formats for discussions, 2+ weeks, okay. Through the gut reaction and more research response and a reflection, okay. Oh, that's an interesting approach, okay. Yes, definitely. Celia says they do like consistent grading formats. So where they go to post your discussions, I do have the grading rubric. So I give mine are set for like 10 points. So the points are for your main post as well as for your 2 responses. I make them do 2 responses. So I run my modules from Monday through Sunday, and all of you might have different formats, right? So by Thursday, they have to make their main post. So then there can be a discussion the remaining 3 days, right? So having a due date for that. So like really clarifying when is your post due, by when should you respond. I think those also are helpful to have that engagement in there, right? Engaging conversation. So that was the 4th one. I also talked about this. I showed you the example even in the in the orientation. This is another very simple strategy. The contact the instructor forum. So actually you see, I have 3 pin discussions. So let's actually talk about all 3, even though I was going to talk only about contact the instructors. If you see, look at my prompt there. I say, please use this forum to post questions to your instructor about the course, including assignments, due dates, and procedures, so that all class members can benefit from it. If your question is personal in nature, please email your instructor directly. So for example, if you have 40 students and there's some clarification that has to be made about a due date, you don't want to get 40 emails, right? So this forum will help you respond to all of them at one point, and they all see it. So, and what I also do at the end of the semester is I go back to the contact the instructor forum and I read through all the questions that came through the semester. And the next time when I'm designing my course, I will make sure that all those questions are answered in the design before the teaching. So with future implementation, my questions have really reduced. For example, this time, I check this regularly. I've received this is my only question so far. We are in week 5. And that was a question about facilitator roles, right? Which already had a page on, and which is a good thing. Again, more questions doesn't mean it's a bad thing, but then you are also able to take those questions and address that in your design for future implementations, which also helps. So that is a contact the instructor forum. I have a student lounge that I built. This is for them to talk to each other, right? I tell them, I don't have to be part of every conversation, like giving a room for them to use to talk. So that is something I give them, a student lounge option. Not always, it doesn't get used always. I haven't quite figured that out, how to get them to engage and, have a conversation outside, the regular course discussion. But sometimes, some semesters, I do some posts. if they want to share resources with each other, sometimes they post or, so that's one thing I do. The last one, the other pinned discussion is also a feature I use, which you might benefit. Again, not directly humanizing, but it's still a helpful functionality. As I told you, I have co-facilitators or discussion facilitators. I have them sign up in week one. And what they do is at the end of their week, one of their responsibility is they have to summarize the discussion. So the Monday following the discussion, they post a summary. So again, could be a humanizing element, just not from the instructor perspective, but from a peer perspective. Somebody is taking the time to read all your posts and summarizing it. I do it for the first forum, and then, so others do it following. And for somebody, especially if you do groups and somebody who's not been part of all the different groups or has had a chance to read through every single post, they can go to a forum summary. I remind them every time I send my weekly announcement, I remind them, go to the summary and then, just read it. It's a lot of really engaging, interesting, meaningful, points that have been made will usually make it to the summary. So that is another strategy that I use in the context of the discussion. Anyway, so contact the instructor forum, a great option that has worked very well. I call it as contact instructor forum. It could be, you could call it as whatever works for you. Feedback in different modalities, so again, when you're submitting your, I like using grading criterias, and graduate students sometimes, even for every single point you take off, they want to know why, right? So, and maybe you have students like that. So like grading criteria are my friend. And then, so in addition, sometimes if you want to make a simple recording to explain, especially if you're grading projects, like you can upload like a comment. Then again, in addition to seeing the criteria, they can also see and hear from you, right? So that's another way you could also humanize your course. But these are definitely, I thought, is typing more time consuming or talking like more time consuming? And which which benefits the students? I think there's mixed findings in research, whether they value text-based feedback or video feedback. But then, with Canvas, the option is there for us. So depending again what content you're teaching and how which of these modalities work best for you, I think you should you can always do that. And again, this is built in within Canvas. So click of a button, you could record. You don't even have to use an external tool and you have to record. Unless if you want to really mark up things, then you could use other tools out there too. So here are the 6 that I want to give a few minutes for questions and for you all at least to think and pick 1 or 2 that you might be integrating in your course. So here are the 6, or I should say 7, we talked through today. So we looked at video-based introduction and orientation. For introduction, I showed you VoiceThread. Orientation, I showed you Camtasia. But we also talked about how that can be done using Screencast-O-Matic or Kaltura. And instructor-generated e-lessons are the same, right? These are also video recordings. And actually, I don't think I had a screenshot for that. Might have missed that. So these are also the short, just like the way I do my, Camtasia recording, I have like an e-lesson recording and use Camtasia again. And moderating discussions, how you can use graphics and videos, not only you facilitating, but then also students responding, they can also do that. And then a periodic announcement is another great strategy you can use. So students know I'm going to hear from an instructor, once a week. The contact the instructor forum I showed you. For general questions about the course and, providing timely feedback. And the timely feedback on assignments is the last one, right? I showed you, we talked about how including a response time in your syllabus, both for the questions as well as for your responses or feedback on assignments, and then following through with that and then responding with different modalities, providing feedback on assignments using different modalities. So that might be another good option. So those were some strategies, I want to leave you with. I'd like for you to walk away. I'd like to hear from you all. Let's take, we have about a remaining at least 5 minutes. So is there one strategy you think you might be able to take and use today? And if anybody wants to pick up the microphone, you could do that too. But if you want to type in the chat, we'll take that too. Celia has a question. How do you know that they read your feedback? Yeah, that's a good point. So the way I do is, my assignments usually build on, like I do a lot of project-based. So they have to, use this feedback. And then when they submit the next version, this can get integrated, right? You see it in the next version. Sometimes I've seen instructors do, even though this is extra work on the instructor, I've seen instructors give them a chance to revise the assignment based on the feedback. That is, again, you're taking on more work on yourself, but then, makes students that at least, some students will look at the feedback. So this week, in one of the same class, actually, I'm teaching, I had students write a teaching philosophy. They got peer feedback before they're getting my feedback. And what they had to do was they had to integrate the peer feedback and then submit it to me before they can get my feedback. So I'm building in that structure in so that they are using that feedback. Okay. Lynn says she likes to respond, idea of responding with different modalities. Okay.
But I am going to jump in and just tell you all, thank you so very much for attending this third session. Thank you so much to Dr. Martin for sharing all of this. It's wonderful. I'm happy to continue the conversation through email. I'm sure Dr. Martin would be happy to respond to any questions you have as well. Don't forget about the resource sheet. And I just wanted to extend another thank you to Dr. Martin and the entire LDT faculty team for supporting us in carrying this. And also thank you to you all for attending. I see a lot of recurring customers, I guess, is a lot of repeat faces. So thank you very, very much to all of you.
Good luck to all of you.